Hi everyone and welcome to your daily horoscope and tarot reading. Today we have a very important and special celestial phenomenon taking place where the nodes of the moon shift from the Cancer Capricorn axis onto Gemini Sagittarius axis. Now I know that I have been talking about this in my previous videos and previous weekly horoscopes, and even we have a special video to explain the implications of this very powerful energy shift. But since it's so very important for all of us, both individually and collectively, I feel the need to greatly emphasize on this. So, since I've talked about the astrology behind all of this in the last videos, today I'm going to be focusing on the tarot reading because sometimes tarot can give us insights which astrology cannot, even though this is a strictly astrological phenomenon which has nothing to do with any other branches of science, even spiritual science, so to speak. But still, the cards are definitely going to give us a very powerful and very unique insight of how this energy shift can influence our lives over the next 18 months. Now, today also, we have still the ongoing conjunction of Mercury and the Sun in the sign of Taurus, which continues yesterday's theme, where very important communication or perhaps maybe epiphanies can enter our lives because both of these planets are very close to Uranus, the planet of shocks, surprises, the higher octaves of knowledge. So that's why when a main luminary is near Uranus and forms a connection with Uranus, it always translates among any other interpretation to epiphany as well, because that is what the sun or the moon actually does. It sheds light on something, and when they're connected to Uranus, that information, because light is information basically, photons which carry an informational charge, it has much to do with Uranus. It can come suddenly, unexpectedly, from every possible source that which we might not even think of, which we might not even anticipate, which we might not even be aware of. So this all throughout this week, very important information, communication, sources of knowledge or clarity, maybe someone else's words, someone else's vision, opinion, advice, maybe constructive criticism can give us a lot of motivation, a lot of personal clarity. This celestial dance basically enforces our mind to figure out stuff. May it be stuff which has to do with our own personal self-worth and our financial situation, maybe our debt, our plans for the future, everything that we need to sort out, especially that things are so very uncertain in the present moment. May it be collectively speaking, where it's humanity's value system that is changing, and all of us need to contribute to that change by reconfiguring it on the inside first of all, and that what is on the inside is going to reflect on the outside. But of course, since the Sun and Mercury are always, regardless of which point of the year, are relatively very close to each other, they're never more than two signs away from each other, but usually that only means one sign or even less. So they're always basically together, and that means the light of truth, that means communication, that means information. And especially in the earthly grounded sign of Taurus, that means much more in tune with reality, much more in tune with real life, all the practical and palpable problems that we face. So this is one of the most constructive and problem-solving energies, because yes, on one hand, Mercury is not extremely comfortable in Taurus, but it also has the Sun and Uranus there, so it helps. It helps greatly. It helps us step into our futures. It helps us ground our thoughts, our mental sphere, our communication. It helps us discern. It helps us, think of everything through logic, rationality, and that means that we're guided and inspired to come up with the most practical solutions and future plans, where it's not our idealism which is the driving force, but it's rather all those things that are practical, palpable, and down to earth, and can resolve problems in a very earthly manner. Uranus is so important because we are not just finding solutions to our immediate problems, but we're thinking about the future, we're thinking really long term, and Jupiter and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn are also very, very long term energy, where whatever we want to construct, whatever we want to build, both individually and collectively, has to be really, really long lasting. It has to have a certain type of longevity attached to it, because that is what we need, both individually and collectively. So this configuration of energy, the cluster of planets in Taurus, but also Capricorn, is really, really good for that. Yes, it may be uncomfortable because Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn are revealing to us very delicate, very hard to face truth. So this is the energy which gets to the core, to the bottom of things. It is like the surgeon's knife which finds the tumor or the problem straight away, but the surgery itself is uncomfortable and painful, while Taurus energy, where it has the Sun, Mercury, and Uranus in it, is basically like a huge earthquake of our value systems, where the shaking of the earth, the traditional, is just destroying everything that we have built until this present moment. But everything that we have built is no longer valid, it no longer reflects our true reality. That is why this massive symbolic earthquake of the value systems is just demolishing the old and inviting all of us to build the new. And to build the new, first of all, we have to find it within us, embody it, and by embodying it, we are projecting our preferences, we're projecting our inner truth regarding our value systems onto external reality, and that in a couple of years, or at least in 7 years, as long as it takes Uranus to transit the sign of Taurus, that is when this new reality, this new value system is definitely going to be reflected in matter as well. And the nodes of the moon, the shift of the lunar nodes, are going to greatly catalyze and add to this and provoke significant progress, significant evolution, and they're also going to give us the power and the virtues that we need to work on in order to accomplish the progress. And as I say, this is perfectly valid both individually and collectively as well. Now, as I said in my previous videos, North Node in Gemini greatly empowers the mental sphere, the practicality of our minds, our sense of logic, power of the intellect. It's all like a big celestial boost to express our most inventive and genius selves, and that always helps because when all of us are connected, because Gemini has also much to do with interhuman connections, communication, everything that we share, every info that we share with others. Now, if all of us are embodying our inner genius, if all of us are embodying our most inventive selves, full of ideas, full of good and constructive thoughts, full of mental insight, for example. Now, if we add all of this into one, well, that is a fantastic good news, full of progress, full of new inventions, full of like revolution, basically, technological, intellectual revolution for humankind. And this, most of all, is going to be reflected in our educational systems. So, how we teach and how we train the next generation, and that is long lasting. That is so very, very important, and it has to last us, it has to serve us at least 18 years from now, because that's when the nodes of the moon are going to return into this position once again. Now, the south node in the sign of Sagittarius is also extremely important because, as we could see from the past, in 2003 more specifically, the last time it was there, it changed air travel, it changed international rules and regulation, it changed the whole European Union as a structure, as a legal alliance, as a common legal system that governs each and every member state. it changed the way we look at religion, because all the terrorist attacks and all the fanaticism and intolerance and deep hatred spread by certain misguided people, so to speak, well, they left a massive impact on all of us. It just opened our minds, it opened even our hearts to how toxic, how destructive, how extremely poisonous dogmas and religious fanaticism truly is. So, the necessity to be much more open, much more flexible, much more versatile is a big must that we have to accomplish together, basically, as a collective, as a species, because history will just keep on repeating itself until all of us learn that rigid faith is unhealthy and healthy faith always questions itself. It always leaves room for new, it always leaves room for evolution, for new schools of thought, because religion and spirituality and ideals, philosophies, life views evolve as our collective evolves, so it cannot stay the same. For example, even if like the religious texts or the principles stay the same because they're traditional, their interpretation then has to be more in tune, more aligned with our present state. May it be psychologically speaking, spiritually, mentally speaking, socially speaking. Our religion and our spiritual idealism basically has to reflect who we are as a species in the present moment, and not who we were 1,000, 2,000, or many years ago. Now, before I get onto the tarot reading, which is also about the nodes of the moon, I just have to mention that there's a quincunx, a minor astrological aspect that the sun and moon formed, the sun with the moon and the moon with Mercury. So today might be a really surprising, delightful for some people and awkward for other people. They bear very unexpected information, communication, ideas, or maybe reflections about your work and your opinions can reach you online or any other means of communication, but at the same time can also represent really humorous, funny randomness and coincidences, because the quincunx can also be interpreted as divine humor. So now let's get on to the tarot reading, where I specifically asked the cards to tell us how the shift of the lunar nodes are going to affect our lives in the coming 18 months. And the reading is opened by the Four of Coins, which speaks volumes about the North Node being in Gemini, because on one hand the North Node is exalted in Gemini, and since the Gemini represents the mental sphere and usually its lower expression, we are talking about the everyday thoughts that we have, our everyday problem solving skills, our usual everyday mental activities. So we're not talking about the deepest philosophical thinking and the big genius, which is more Sagittarius and Aquarius than Gemini. But since the North Node is exalted in this part of the sky, that is exactly where we're upgrading our, everyday mental activities to always have room for the highest expression of these energies. So basically, this is a major and massive upgrade where what we're basically gonna do is make sure that our thoughts, our mental activities, our thought processes, maybe even the basic autopilot, even the basic chitter chatter of the mind is going to be healthy, always, and I mean always, serve our highest good, because many people don't know that is exactly where their biggest problem lies, because they are full of doubts, they're full of fears, they're full of self-defeating thoughts. They always compare themselves to other people and situations, and how other people do stuff, and that you always leads to low self-esteem, that always leads to low self-worth, feeling confused, not having any success in absolutely anything that you do, because when you're already defeating your actions with your thoughts, well then, mind over matter, and especially when the North Node is in Gemini, then mind over matter becomes part of everyday life. So what you think is what you're gonna attract in your life. And this is where we have to be very, very careful about the frequency of our thoughts and even the basic chitter chatter of our minds, because that is how we create reality. So, yes, absolutely, our biggest and deepest life philosophies and visions and contemplations and reflections may set the tone for the big picture and the big future, but our most practical and common thoughts are the ones which create our everyday reality, our everyday lives. So those have to be just as healthy as our big ideologies, as our big life philosophies and life views. Because it's not sufficient to believe in the highest principles but act in the totally opposite manner in your everyday life. And this is when the energies are going to be so very direct and down to earth, where they are for some people they will act like a massive inspirational force, because every good thought, and here I don't mean toxic positivity where you just focus on happy happy joy joy, no, not at all. It is just self-empowerment where you have to believe in something, where you have to believe and commit to what you say, what you speak, what you express, what you communicate, what when you manifest your thoughts by action. You have to be aligned to all of this. And of course, when you're aligned, it leads to success. But at the same time, when you're not aligned, when you defeat your own actions with your mental sphere by allowing your fears and insecurities and your subconscious to rule your existence, well, then you're gonna have a life of failures one after another, because your mind is defeating you. So this is gonna be like a big karmic whip, where physical reality each and every day of the next 18 months of our lives is gonna manifest what we think of. So when we think empowering thoughts, when we just wanna find solutions, when we really are focused and concentrated upon progress, then of course life and physical reality is gonna help us in a very miraculous and direct manner, because that is what we create. But at the same time, for many people who keep on thinking self-defeating thoughts, and I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not skilled enough, this is never gonna work, well, in my life this is definitely gonna lead to failure because I know myself. Well, if you think this, karma is gonna punish you, as in punishment symbolically, because you are punishing yourself, not karma. And so this is gonna manifest all your fears instantly. And then, regardless of your intellectual capacity, of your level of wisdom, you're still gonna figure stuff out that whenever you just bash yourself with your thoughts, you're gonna fail. And whenever you're gonna be more optimistic and believe in yourself, you're gonna succeed. So you don't even need gurus to tell you this. Your physical life, your everyday activities, your everyday goals, wherever you focus and place your energy into, is gonna teach you and train you how to empower your thoughts. Because many of us, our lives are gonna depend on this, so there's no choice. You don't need any guru, because the universe, karma, the energy of this North Node is gonna be our greatest teacher. And for very many people, this is gonna miraculously heal their self-worth, because they can, process mentally what self-worth truly is. And when they have their eureka moment, when they have their great epiphany, that it all depends on the mind, well then of course they're gonna heal themselves, heal their self-worth, heal their lives, heal the lives of others. So this is a really, really positive energy, because many people are gonna embody their true self-worth and their true roles, may it be spiritually, physically, the job-wise, career-wise, life path-wise. This is gonna be a massive wake up call for a lot of people because of the mental sphere, the healthy way to use the mental sphere, mind over matter. And of course, it's not just mind over matter because this is Gemini duality. So the mind always has to be in tune with the intelligence of the heart. Because, yes, absolutely, emotions and the heart, even physically, even the physical flesh and blood heart, has certain neurons in it which give it like a special type of logic and intelligence. So yes, emotions and the heart does have an intelligence of its own, and when it's perfectly aligned and in tune with the mind, when you're full of love, yes, self-love is totally valid in this case. Well, then things are going to work in a very miraculous way, as if the divine intelligence, if basically the will of God is guiding you as if by miracle. So, yes, this North Node in Gemini is a very, very significant energy because our destinies, collectively and personally, are gonna go where our mind goes. And if our mind is full of love, if our mind is full of wanting to succeed in a healthy way, well, then that is good news for everyone. Now, the Hermit follows, and this represents that the shift of the nodes is gonna heal everyone from a totally different kind of perspective. Where in the modern era and the recent past, the last 20 years, for example, loneliness, feeling abandoned, feeling isolated in your own life, um, even when you're surrounded by millions of people, because there's no actual emotional connection, many people are feeling extremely lonely, and this loneliness is turning into depression, and depression ultimately turns into suicide, and very many like VIPs, stars, musicians, singers have actually revealed that this is a big problem that our society has in this modern era, basically. Those famous suicides and their lives being ruined and destroyed were basically due to the lack of true soul level, heart level connections, and they felt so very lonely. But of course, it's not just them, it's all of us. It's humanity as a collective. So, yes, we are more connected than ever with the internet and with any other type of technology, and our IQs are bigger than at any given moment in history. Even our emotional intelligence is much more sophisticated as a species, but yet we're feeling so very alone in our lives. And this is the type of energy, the Gemini and Sagittarius axis, when we develop a totally different kind of normality where solitude, especially sacred solitude, us being our best friends, us being our own mentors, teachers, and guides, us being fulfilling every single emotional role in our lives is the next normality. Because when you're alone, when you're in sacred solitude, but you embrace that state, you love that state, you are extremely free in that state, well, then your mind can go and philosophize. Your mind can go where at any other time it just couldn't reach because of your personal drama. When you just free yourself from every single social or whatever illusion that might be chaining you, well, then you're already embodying your most authentic and healthy faith, and your soul and mind can just explore the cosmos, your inner world, nature, or your mind can go wherever it wants to. But when it goes there, that is not unhealthy escapism, but that is inspiration, that is divine knowledge, that is epiphanies, that is you researching what life, the universe, existence means for you personally. So it's always gonna be something really positive, fun, joyful. So that is when solitude is no longer gonna be our enemy, but our best friend. So when solitude is our very best friend, well, then relationships change, divorces and marriages and partnerships change, alliances change, work related, alliances, one on one alliances change, contracts change, legislation changes, psychology changes, spirituality changes, the south node in Sagittarius basically. When our relations to ourselves changes, when we embody our non-linear logic, our divine logic, and we do not fear it, and we do not run from it, and when we do not demonize it, well then the world, reality, our world vision changes. The next card that follows is the wheel, and this is really significant for a number of different reasons, because on one hand it 100% points to the great conjunction on the 21st of December 2020 when Jupiter meets in the sky with Saturn in 0 degrees of Aquarius, and that is opening a totally new paradigm, worldview, world vision for all of us, both individually and collectively. And that is when we can actually embody and use mind over matter principle, because it will shift the energy onto air element, and air is intellect, mind, intelligence, cerebral activities, our uniqueness, our distinctiveness, our Aquarian natures basically. But on the other hand, it definitely represents the beginning of a new era from a totally different perspective, because the Wheel of Fortune can represent the Wheel of Karma, where all of us are stepping into a totally new phase karmically, where we might have absorbed, absolved, or, worked towards the clearing of our bad ancestral karma, collective karma that we inherited. Basically, what I'm telling is, this is the moment when all of us, when humanity as a collective, is basically cleansing itself from very toxic bad karma that we have created for ourselves, with all the wars, with all the disasters, with all the hatred and intolerance. And this is why this coronavirus and global crisis situation is so very important, because on one hand we are facing what we have done, we are receiving much needed clarity from every single point of view, but at the same time, because all of this brought out the very, very, very best in some people, and it just turned them into mountains of compassion and forgiveness and, solidarity, humanitarianism, that is also a massive karmic energy which is dissolving all the blockages and opening the gates to our futures. So we are healing ourselves even karmically. Of course, think about it logically, it makes so much sense. When our mental spheres are healthy and they're not defeating us. But of course, at the same time, when our life philosophies, when our greatest principles, when our religious views, when our, the expression of our faith is also healthy, and we expressly do not repeat the old patterns, our old mistakes, well then of course we made it. Of course we already, by doing these simple inner work, we already are inviting a big karmic harvest for all of us. So what I'm saying, of course the world is going to change in a much better, in a much more positive direction when we do all this inner work, when we embody our very, very best selves. And it doesn't take every single living being on this planet to do this. Even when just 30% of the most brilliant minds of humankind do this inner work, well then it's already a future full of hopes, full of opportunities, full of great big progresses, because the few enlightened people are gonna drag the whole planet from an energetic perspective into this very optimistic future, so to speak. And why shouldn't it be optimistic? If we do the inner work, well then we deserve it. All of us deserve it. Now the reading is closed by the Empress and the Queen of Wands cards. Basically, these represent how this big karmic shift is going to be manifested in external reality, and the Empress is really, really relevant because she has much to do with Taurus, she has much to do with Venus in Taurus, which means that from a psychological and emotional perspective, our value systems are already totally different. They're already based much more on morality, on love, on forgiveness, on equality, on solidarity, where for the simple fact that we are born alive as living human beings, that makes us already worthy to have the best in life. And when this principle, so to speak, reaches collective consciousness and it becomes basically a human right in a totally much more elevated manner than it has been part of the world until this present moment, well, then that is going to massively change everything. This is where healthy relationships based on true love and soul level connections are gonna be formed. This is when true emotional prosperity can enter into all of our lives, and when we are prosperous emotionally, when we are alive, when we are given that freedom to be alive and just enjoy everything, good and bad, of course, that physical existence offers us, well, then society is going to reflect that change in a totally different manner, because a wealthy and prosperous man or woman is going to be someone who basically just enjoys their existence, whose life is filled with self empowerment, with true soul level prosperity, and not money. When the role that they perform is going to be done with so much love and passion that Queen of Wands, when all of us are going to embody our passions and everything that we love, well, then the world is going to be so very different. And as I said before, this is Gemini energy and Sagittarius energy. This is mutable energy. So we don't need a slave master, we don't need a taskmaster, an overseer, we don't need a guru, we don't need a teacher, we don't need a leader to teach us this. We don't need to be supervised by anyone, because this Gemini represents freedom. Sagittarius also represents even greater freedom, the freedom of the spirit. So all of us are going to do this in our own special and unique way, with our own unique destinies, with our own unique karma, with our own unique archetypes and inner configuration. And we don't need another person or another force, another god, another guide or whatever, or an alien civilization to come and teach us this, because the universe is going to work through the individual and not the collective, because that is the great conjunction in Aquarius. The individual is going to be empowered. The key to the future lies in the individual and very small groups and collectives, and not all of us forced into being as one. So it's not the type of socialist or communist take on things, but rather where the individual respects another individual out of the goodness of their hearts and the wisdom that they possess. And that is gonna make things happen, and not so much the rules and laws which force us to be united, but rather unity will come out of a common desire, so it's not forced on us. I said earlier, the power belongs exclusively right now, and it's going to be that way in the next coming 100 years. It belongs to the individual, so the individual has to make things happen. Centralized power will not have that much saying in it. They're just gonna, perform their basic roles and as into keep law and order, but that's it. The decision, the power, the vision, the plans belong exclusively to the individual, and centralized power is gonna be what it has always should have been, just a symbol of the collective will and nothing more. And yes, absolutely, this is bad news for big companies, big organizations, like the big international world banks, the world finances, because they are not going to be needed or wanted anymore. But of course, humanity is going to find a totally new solution to take their places. because this isn't going to lead to conflicts and strife, but rather it's going to lead to solutions where alliances, mutual respect is going to be the key to everything, where many different small groups are going to be interconnected to one another and not as much one single ruling organization which just dictates everything. No, it's going to be like a cosmic democracy, basically, that is going to guide our everyday normalities and how things are going to function in our lives. But this isn't in the immediate future, it's towards the end of this decade. So it's not going to happen overnight, but it is going to happen almost overnight inside of us, where this necessity, this, like cosmic blueprint towards which the energies are rearranging themselves, is gonna exist inside of us. And that's why towards the end of this decade we're gonna be living this. It's gonna manifest an external reality one way or another. This is why the North Node in Gemini is so important, because this isn't like coming up with a rigid, strict ABC plan that has to be enacted 100%, but this is where we can readapt, change, make compromises if necessary, abandon old compromises, do things differently whenever the situation requires it. So it's not just a good work in progress, but it's the kind of work in progress which always renews itself, which always is in tune with the current shift of energies, whatever the present moment requires us to do, and we can change and readapt our personal plans to match it. So this is a really good and powerful energy to make significant progress in absolutely everything. And since our education systems change, that progress is long lasting, because this is what we're teaching, or what we're gonna be teaching to our children and next generations. Well, thank you so much for listening. I advise everyone to pay close attention to this week and next week, to what you're feeling, to what things, events transcend in your life, to what takes place, because it will definitely give you and set a tone for the next 18 months of your life, and it can give you a really good hint of what karmically you have to accomplish in your life personally. Thank you again, and have a safe and blessed day, everyone. Bye for now.